Speaking of some sort of villain, the media and the journalists around town have made Andy Ngo out to be a villain. And Andy, it's impossible for me to find someone who has probably done better journalistic work in the last couple of years uncovering what Antifa is. Although, Jack, obviously you've done quite a good job yourself. So Andy was attacked in Portland by a bunch of Antifa activists the other day. This will not be covered on CNN today. This will not be covered on MSNBC, and I'm guessing it ain't going to be in the New York Times. Andy sent out a long Twitter thread about it. I'm just going to read the two first ones, and then we're going to show you some images of what happened to him. This is directly from Andy himself. No journalist in America should ever face violence for doing his or her job. Yet on Friday, May 28th, Antifa tried to kill me again while I was reporting on the ongoing protests and riots in Portland, Oregon for a new chapter of my book, Unmasked: Inside Antifa's Radical Plan to Destroy Democracy. I was chased, attacked, and beaten by a masked mob baying for my blood. Had I not been able to shelter wounded and bleeding inside a hotel while they beat the doors and windows like animals, there is no doubt in my mind I would not be here today. Their words, like their actions, speak for themselves. He went on in the Twitter thread, and if we can we throw to some of the images while I'm mentioning this? As I said at the top of the show, I actually met Andy at that hotel years ago for the first time we ever met each other. He's the most soft-spoken, decent guy you could ever want to meet. This is not someone that wants to be involved in violence or inflaming the situation or anything else. Jack, because you're writing a book, or you just wrote a book, and you're also talking about Antifa all the time, why is this not being covered in an honest way? And what do you think is Andy's responsibility as a journalist knowing he's going to be targeted there? Because I saw a couple people who I usually respect their opinions sort of being like, oh, no, he shouldn't have gone there, which is kind of like telling a woman she shouldn't, go out alone at night.
Oh, yeah. Well, to just kind of answer the second part of that, I would definitely, if that were me, I'd want to have some security. I'd want to have some backup, have them also be dressed in, sort of the black garb of the black bloc, have them look like they're infiltrating, not carrying weapons or anything like that. Unless, of course, the black bloc already is, in which case, fine, go for it. But yeah, I get what people are saying, that obviously we want Andy to be safe. We know that we want people out there watching his back. I hope that that's something that we can get going in the future when this comes up, because the real situation is that when it comes to this organization, they are an anarcho-communist syndicate at this point that is pushing for violence in all of these major cities across the country. We saw them in Minneapolis again just last night. And not only the media gives them a pass, right? The media, they'll hand out these little flyers when you go out, and they say, if you want to cover one of our events, you have to abide by our rules. And we talk about this in the book, where, you can't show our faces, you can't show any action, you can't show any violence, you can't show anything that could identify us. And as long as you abide by those rules and basically take our side and everything and don't do actual journalism, then we'll treat you fine. If not, we're going to put umbrellas in your face, we're going to attack you, or like in my case, we're going to try to push you down concrete steps to get you to crack your head open in front of a statue in Lincoln Park there in D.C. And so when it comes down to it, though, the bigger problem on a higher level is, why is the Department of Justice not going after these people? We've seen the way that they've treated January 6th, tweeting out the pictures, asking people to help identify. Where's any of that for Antifa? They are just as much insurrectionists, insurgents. They're out there night after night. And when it comes to the city of Portland, they're attacking actual federal facilities.
Well, weren't we told that you're allowed to attack federal facilities as long as it's at night and nobody's in there? Wasn't that literally was it the mayor of Portland that said that?
No, no. Unfortunately, that was our Attorney General, Merrick Garland, who said that during his his confirmation hearings. So my question is, what if it's dusk? What if it's like you're right on the cusp of it? It's like before a hockey game, and you're there with the sticks, and you're like ready to go.
No, right, exactly.
It's silly. It's silly.
Right. What if somebody's working late? I mean, it is possible. I know it's the government.
And obviously, we know there are people in there because there were federal agents in the building at the time. So yes, Attorney General Garland, there were people working there. They were working to defend the courthouse against the thugs that you won't bring charges against.
Steve, to Jack's point, I mean, do you think the feds are going to get involved? I mean, finally, the mayor of Portland, Ted Wheeler, started pushing back against them a little bit after he basically poured gas on the flames for the last 2 years. I mean, do we need the feds to be involved? Why are we letting masked thugs burn down our cities? Crazy question, I know.
I thought they should have been dealt with as a foreign hostile power for declaring they had a 9-block independent zone last summer, frankly, and made an example out of. But no, they won't be dealt with until or unless it impacts the overall leftist narrative. And then that's when they'll learn really quick that the first rule of assassination is that you kill the assassins. And I want to go back for just a second on the cognitive dissonance aspect and with Andy and the bravery of what he has been doing for these last couple of years. So yesterday, my publisher sent me a piece that The Atlantic had written about what had been some of the more successful conservative books so far in the Biden era, which is 6 months old. And the highest selling book within conservative publishing so far this year is actually Andy's book on Antifa. And this was mentioned by McKay Coppins, the writer at The Atlantic, who specifically mentioned it by name. Now, where again? So I want to make sure we remove all the innocent motivations here. All right. You're citing the success of this guy's book. You're citing that it's the most successful book in a genre this entire year. So either he's a total fraud making a bunch of slanderous and libelous claims who should be exposed, or he's exposing a thugocracy. It's one or the other. Aren't you at least the least bit intellectually curious which one it is?
Right. And of course, the irony is that everybody that writes a piece now about Andy in mainstream media or corporate press, whatever you want to call them, as Michael Malice puts it, they always make a point of saying conservative journalist Andy Ngo. Now, I mentioned on Twitter, I know Andy pretty well. He by no means is a traditional conservative. Again, he's gay, not that you can't be a gay conservative. But the point is, I think he's probably an old school liberal who's just been, for lack of a better term, mugged by reality in this case.
Honestly, I've talked to Andy a million times. I have no idea what his politics are.
He's a journalist, so I don't know.
That's the truth. To tell you because he's never even brought it up.
I'm totally with you on that. I have a slight inkling on some things, but in no way when they say conservative, they're trying to paint him as something that he probably is not. Amala, what about just the general idea that either journalists can now be attacked, or just what we saw in New York and in LA in the last couple of weeks, that you can just attack random people on the streets, and that this thing seems like it's being exacerbated?
It's just a sad state of affairs that now look at all the bad journalism that is happening right now with mainstream media that goes completely unaccountable. And you have Andy Ngo, who is a great journalist, who is doing very good work and is simply telling the truth. And that is his reward for what he's doing. And anybody who comes out and says anything that criticizes the left, especially the extreme left, is labeled a conservative journalist, even though, like you said, he's not very apparent about where he lies politically. And it's a very sad state of affairs. And we see all these politicians who say, well, Antifa is just an idea. It doesn't represent a terrorist organization. They're not doing anything domestically that's causing any harm to America. But last time I checked, ideas don't mob people. They don't trample them and beat them down in the streets.
Right. Well, exactly. If any of these things that we've seen in the last 2 years could be linked back to Trump supporters, as Jack pointed out, after what happened on the 6th, it would be like they'd be telling us we're in World War III. Jack, do you think we're going to find links between Antifa and the Democratic Party, or at least something more tangible than they seem to tacitly support them?
Well, so what you really see in the dichotomy, or I should say like the dynamic between Antifa and the Democrat Party, is that Antifa exists to be that leading edge, the tip of the spear of the Overton window with Antifa. I talk about this and go to antifabook.com and see it. Shameless book club.
No, that was good. That was like a pro.
And what you see is then the Democrats, or increasingly the DSA, where Antifa recruits from, it's really just in many cases the DSA at night with masks and black shirts on. But they can say, well, look, we're not as extreme as Antifa. We don't want to abolish the police. We just want to change the funding. We just want to tweak a few things. You can actually see Joe Biden do this in real time when they ask him about some of these Antifa DSA slogans, where he says, oh, no, I just want to recommit things. I want to change it. So that's exactly how you see Antifa working. And by the way, when people tell me, is Antifa just an idea, right? I look at them and I say, well, radical Islam is just an idea, but you know what? Right. They've got cells, they've got groups, they've got organizations, and they commit terrorist attacks. So yeah, they're an idea that forms a movement, that starts a network, that has splinter cells, that gets people hurt and gets people killed. So sure, why not? But if you sound like a lunatic if you're saying that in 2021, that Antifa is just an idea.
Yeah, great point. Steve, as a guy that tries to communicate these ideas to people, what can we do to actually show people that this thing is exactly what Jack just pointed out and not just some amorphous idea?
I think they have to be confronted on a legal matter, political matter, on a military matter. Frankly, I think they should be treated if it was Islam that claimed to occupy 9 city blocks of a major American city, I would assume we would treat that as a hostile invading force. And one of the things that's puzzled me about Antifa this entire time, is it just me? Okay, but every time one of these kids gets, or one of these guys gets unmasked, doesn't it look like when we were in youth football and you're like slowly going into the line, you're sizing up when the Oklahoma drill's coming up and you're like, all right, I don't want to be opposite this guy, so let me let these 3 guys go ahead of me. Every one of them's like the dweeb you gave swirlies to in the locker room, right? It's like they specifically target guys who are taking humanities or women's studies with a Y in college, 301, and think and fantasize at night about being a badass because they played some military first-person shooter game once. I mean, why do all of these guys, whenever they're unmasked, look like complete and total dweebs?
Wait, actually, I want to, before I give Amala the final word, I want to ask Jack that very question, because when you see these pictures of these people, when they finally are unmasked, Steve's totally right. And also, it seems that a huge percentage of them are on drugs. And we know that there's obviously an opioid and fentanyl crisis right now. Do you have any info on that? Like how many of these people are actually hooked on drugs and how that is all connected?
So when I was in Chaz, we talk about this in the book as well. But when I spent the several days and nights out there, I mean, drugs were plentiful. People were coming up to us, because we're dressed in sort of the appropriate attire for the Chaz, and people were coming to us. At one point, a guy came up to me with a trash can lid that was turned upside down, and he had just various types of drugs on it, everything from weed to shrooms to stuff that I didn't even know about. And he was just, hey, do you want some? Partake, my brethren, right? And then he sort of he was on rollerblades, and he just skated off to somewhere else. That was the kind of atmosphere you had in there. There was a homeless encampment where drugs were absolutely plentiful. That led to people getting killed, people getting stabbed in that homeless camp. So, I mean, this was a huge part and parcel of exactly what was going on, because partially it specifically with Chaz, it wasn't even so much that it was the activists bringing it in from Antifa, but once you told people that, hey, there's a crime-free, or, I should say a law enforcement-free area, those criminal elements, those drug elements, all of that was coming and congregating within that Chaz zone.
Amala, I keep going to you as the young person, giving me some hope here.
Right.
But do you think that young people are watching this going, maybe law and order ain't that terrible? Maybe we should actually fund police. Maybe we should arrest people for committing murder and that sort of thing?
I would certainly hope so, but I think the issue is that social media, mainstream media, and even now our public schooling systems are pushing children and young people to be these sort of radical vessels for the left. And as much as the left wants to say that schools are a school to prison pipeline, right now they are a school to radicalism pipeline, and they're teaching the children this sort of ideology, the gender theory, the CRT, and it is pushing them to act like the Antifa members out in Portland. And it's very unfortunate. And it's something that has really run rampant within Portland schools through the research that I've done. And I think we're leaning more towards that within our public institutions. And that's where young people are being influenced.
I think, in short, we got work to do.